lot of the descriptions that you'll hear about narcissists, including in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychiatry, is only geared towards overt narcissists. The Institution of Psychology and Psychiatry does not take into account the covert types. Personally, I think the covert types are by far the most dangerous because of how hidden they are, how much they get away with because they're flying under the radar, and because it's often overlooked by mental health professionals who don't know how to recognize it because they are working within the paradigm of the DSM, which doesn't describe this archetype of abusers. In this video, I want to talk about the differences between the overt and the covert types of abusers. So I want to talk about the differences between the overt and the covert types of narcissists or other abusers. Keep in mind, I recently did a video that you can check the link up here on what is a narcissist and how I use that word on this channel. I'm going to describe the overt narcissist, how they love bomb, how they devalue, how they hoover, and how they apologize. And then I'm going to do the same for the covert narcissist. Keep in mind, some abusers use a mix of overt and covert tactics, and inevitably, even the most covert of abusers eventually at some point reveals themselves and becomes more overt. That's usually when you call them out and figure out what's going on. The overt narcissist is openly arrogant, insensitive, and self-absorbed. They are the wolf that looks like a wolf. They are the typical bullies that you think of. They're openly grandiose, they're explicitly abusive. You know that meme about the Dos Equis guy who calls himself the most interesting man in the universe? That's how I see the overt narcissist. They're very open about how they feel about themselves. They have no shame in projecting that and telling other people who they are and how they're the best and they're the most important person in the world. So you might be asking, if they're so overt and obvious, how did they get away with it? One, I think it's because no matter what, there will always be people who justify, minimize, and make excuses for even the most overt forms of abuse. It'll often sound something like, that's just so-and-so. Two, people are often quite afraid and intimidated by the overt types, and that will often lead to fawning and enabling behaviors. And three, because some people admire and feel safe with that form of narcissism because that looks like strength to them. An overt narcissist love bombs with intense sexual desire if you are in a romantic relationship. In any kind of relationship that you have with them, family, friends, etc., they're always going to be doing, look how great I am, sorts of behaviors. Maybe they even directly say that sort of thing. They're always going to have to outshow everyone else publicly. They're going to use the people in their life as public trophies. They can have a trophy wife or husband. They can have a trophy family. They can have, this trophy sort of thing going on at work or even in their friendships or their social circles. When they flatter you, they most often are flattering your physical body, your money, your house, your car, your watch, your stuff, the material things. And their image that they're most worried about projecting in public is being the strongest and the best. An overt narcissist devalues with explicit verbal abuse. They'll use shaming tactics. They're going to call you weak, too sensitive, a loser, a failure, worthless, nobody wants you. They're going to do very open forms of triangulation. There won't be anything hidden. They will let you know to your face that they're flirting, having sex with someone else, or if it's in the family, that triangulation will also be very open where they're using other family members to triangulate you. They're bringing other people into the family or even people who married into the family. They're using to very openly and directly triangulate you with. The overt types are also usually more prone to physical abuse. They have very open and obvious rage, which instills a form of terror in their victims. They're usually very sexually aggressive in romantic relationships, and they will do very degrading things to you sexually, whether it's a man or a woman. If it's a woman, she's going to humiliate you and emasculate you as a man. If it's a man, they're going to dominate and degrade your body, using you like an object. The overt narcissist loves to continually remind you of your mistakes directly, shamelessly. They'll do it in front of an audience as well, because they want the audience to get involved, to gang up against you and shame you as well. They're very condescending and cruel, but in a very open way. Like, you have no doubt about it that that is condescending and cruel. The overt narcissist will directly and aggressively bulldoze your boundaries. Anytime you set a boundary, they're just going to plow right through that. You can just see they have no respect for boundaries. They've just bulldozed every single boundary you've ever tried to set. And part of that devaluation is the smear campaign, which the overt type often does by calling you crazy, by telling other people that you're crazy, by getting other people to gang up against you and call you crazy. So how does an overt narcissist apologize? They don't. They almost never apologize. And if they do eke out some words that sound like an apology, there will always be a secondary clause that's, but you made me do it. If I did that, you made me do it. An overt narcissist will also often insult you until you apologize for whatever it was that they did. So again, that insulting looks like direct, explicit, verbal abuse. It's very clearly abusive. The overt narcissist hoovers with intense, incessant contact. And it will go very fast between the love bombing and the devaluation. They'll often start with the love bombing, hoovering, I miss you, I love you, whatever, and then flip very quickly to the devaluation. But it's always going to be very intense. It's going to be aggressive. It's like they're blowing up your phone or whatever, contact, your door, whatever they're doing to try to get to you. They might even go to your work office. They might go in person to people that you know. It's what I would call the machine gun approach. It's like, right? Intense, aggressive hoovering. The overt type is also going to try to get sex from you right away if you are in a romantic relationship with them, because they know that if they use that sexual seduction, that really hooks you back into that trauma bond, strengthens the trauma bond again. They'll use overt threats. They'll make very overt threats against you, against your life. They will often use physical violence. They might try to break in. They might do vandalism to your house, your car, your property. And just remember, when the overt narcissist uses the words "I miss you" in a hoovering attempt, what they mean is, I miss your body. I miss degrading your body, using your body like an object, or I miss your stuff. I miss your money, your car, your house, your status, whatever it was that they got from you in those material ways. So that's the summary of the overt type. Now I want to talk about the covert type of narcissist. Now, this is the one that some people will call the vulnerable narcissist. Personally, I don't like that terminology, because there ain't nothing vulnerable about a covert narcissist. They are sneaky, they are stealth, they are sophisticated and elegant, and they will destroy you with very indirect, unclear, underhanded methods. These are the wolves in sheep's clothing. This is why they're far more dangerous, because if you see a wolf in the distance, you will learn to run. Once you discover that a wolf is a predator and that's not a friend or a snuggly buddy, you're gonna run away. But if you see a sheep in the distance, you might want to go up and snuggle that sheep. You might think, oh, what a soft, sweet little animal, but you don't realize what's underneath that disguise. A covert narcissist will use false humility. So they'll look very different on the surface than the overt type, who's overtly arrogant, conceited, grandiose. You won't get that feeling at all. There's a lot of false humility that you might mistake for actual humbleness. Covert type seems very nice, very genuine, very generous, very altruistic. Oftentimes they're doing all kinds of charity, giving things to you when you meet them, and just in general in society, so nobody else really knows who this person is either. The covert types are incredible at playing the victim. So that's very different than the overt type, who will shame people by calling them weak. When you see in the comments people shaming people for falling for the abuse and all that, and they call you weak, that's an overt narcissist. That word just gives them right away. But the covert narcissist is not ashamed of calling themselves a victim and using that pity ploy to victimize you. They're very underhanded and two-faced. They'll be nice and sweet and all that on the surface to your face, even though it's hollow, but then behind your back, they're doing everything to destroy you. You know, if you grew up with a parent who was a covert narcissist, at home and in the personal life, you saw a monster. But when you went out in public, that person behaved like an angel, like a saint, and nobody got it. Nobody could see it. And as a child, and even as an adult, but especially as a child, when you're powerless, when you're defenseless, when you're stuck in that situation, you just feel an incredible sense of frustration that no one will believe you. So the covert type is very hidden, externally, especially outside of the home. The intimate partner, the children, that family is going to suffer the most with the covert narcissist. They're also very tricky. They can look like an empath or a codependent because of all that fake altruism and generosity that they're doing, but also because they're very needy. An overt type is not needy at all. They don't act that way at all. They consider neediness weakness, but a covert type is very needy. They need you. They need that relationship. They're not afraid to admit that. So how does the covert type get away with it? Well, number one, because it's so hidden. It's so hard to identify, even by mental health professionals. The mental health books just do not take this into account. That is exactly why they are by far the most dangerous forms of abusers between the overt and the covert type, even though the overt one looks so much more clearly aggressive and abusive on the surface. That's just a lot easier to recognize than the covert type. Number two, they get away with it because of the plausible deniability. Everything they do has plausible deniability, and so you as a victim keep thinking, okay, maybe they didn't mean it that way. Maybe they didn't do it that way. Maybe they really didn't say that. And so you're very, very confused about who they are. Number three, because no one else gets it. If you talk to other people in your family, they don't see it. You talk to your rest of your friends in that social group, they don't see that person. You talk to people at work, they probably don't see that person, or they don't want to. Or if it's your intimate partner, it's like no one else in their social circle or in your social circle can often recognize that. People need to be really woke and really trained in this to understand what a covert narcissist is when they haven't been directly abused by that person. Even when you are abused by a covert type, it's still so difficult to put your finger on exactly what's wrong, to be able to call it out as abuse, because there's so much plausible deniability. And by the way, the most dangerous of the covert types is the spiritual covert narcissist. I'm going to be doing an upcoming video on the spiritual type of narcissist, so you can see just how dangerous that kind of person is. So how does a covert narcissist love bomb? They often flatter your mind, your talents, your accomplishments. They seem very interested in you when you first meet them. Unlike the overt type, who's very interested in telling you how great they are, the covert type will do a little bit of that in underhanded and backhanded ways. They'll give themselves compliments in backhanded ways, but mostly they're gonna act like they're interested in you. They're gonna act like they're just taken by you. They just admire you so much. And again, it's gonna be less about your physical body and the materialistic things, which is why on the surface it might look like they're actually valuing you, but it's just empty. It's very difficult to notice how shallow and hollow that is, how shallow their emotions actually are. They're just generating a large sense of intensity around those things. And if you're really desperately looking for someone to approve of you, recognize your accomplishments and talents, you could easily get confused by that. The image that the covert type wants to portray is the perfect family, the perfect personality of the giver, the altruist, the good doer in society. And then they like to use the family unit to portray the perfect family. They're the perfect husband or wife, grandparent, whatever in that family. And they're going to use that image of perfection. So they're always going to be doing image management to make sure that that image remains perfect, that the dirty deeds never get out, that the bad things that happen in that family never get out. If one of their children brings shame to them because they didn't fulfill whatever role or accomplishment they felt would bring that sense of perfection, they will be very careful to hide all of that and portray a different image out in public. The covert type is going to act very supportive. You might just start dating this person or becoming friends with them, and they're trying to fix all your problems. They want to take your car in to get fixed, whatever. They want to lend you money. They want to come help you with this, help you with that. And it really looks like support on the surface. Even when you talk about your dreams and your plans and they seem so interested and supportive, remember, they're just data mining. They're just extracting and remembering information that they will use against you in a very indirect, backhanded way. And you're going to later be starting to be like, this is so confusing because they seem so supportive. But then I also get this weird feeling that they're just trying to do something to hurt me. With the covert types, you're going to notice an excessive sweetness. It's the sucralose sweet. It's actually a neurotoxin. It will kill you if you ingest a lot of that. It's not real. The devaluation of a covert type is death by 1,000 cuts. It's very underhanded. It's very indirect. They will shame you indirectly by shaming someone else and telling you about that. Everything that they say to you, you have to read between the lines to find how they're abusing you. But it's very cleverly disguised as love or support, or as putting someone else down, but they're actually referring to you without saying you. They're going to use very subtle forms of triangulation. So they're never going to flirt directly in front of you. They're never going to tell you that they're sleeping with someone else. Or if it's at work, they're not going to make that triangulation open between other employees or whatever. If it's in the family, it will be a very subtle and indirect triangulation where they're comparing you against other family members or people who married into the family, or they're simply gossiping and talking about those other people, about specific things meant to put you down and make you feel bad. They could even be idealizing or love bombing someone else intentionally to devalue you because they never say those positive things about you, or they never recognize those things in you. The covert type has a very elegant form of cruelty and condescension. It will be very hard to notice at first, but you're always going to have that ick, ooh, sort of feeling. You just can't really put your finger on it because, again, there's always that plausible deniability. And if you call it out, they're going to gaslight you. No, I didn't mean that. I'm sorry you interpreted it that way. I'm sorry you're hurt, but it's not real. The covert type could be asexual. They could be not sexual. They might deprive you of sexuality if you're in a romantic relationship with them. You could also find that they have these really weird sexual perversions. Like, it could be pedophilia. It could be, the main pedophiles are the most covert. You don't realize that they're actually pedophiles. You think they're pillars of society. They could have other, BDSM or other sorts of sexual perversions that they'll very gently and slowly indoctrinate you into, and they'll disguise it all as love. Of course, the covert type is usually very carefully hiding lots of other affairs that they're having. The covert type is going to play the victim when you set boundaries. So the overt type is directly going to bulldoze those boundaries. The covert type is going to take the roundabout way. They're going to shame you. They're going to guilt trip you. They're going to play the victim to get you to go back on your boundaries. The covert type is the master of the guilt trip. One of their favorite forms of devaluation is the silent treatment. They will just ignore you. They won't talk to you. They'll disappear if you're not meeting their needs for narcissistic supply, if you set boundaries, if you call out one of their unacceptable behaviors. So you'll feel this silent rage that they have towards you for that, And you'll notice that anytime you try to call things out, they will ignore you until you start apologizing and going back to them. Now, what the covert form does is often what they're not doing. It's the passive aggressive things where they don't take action, they don't fulfill responsibilities, they create crises, they make you end up cleaning up all the mess of those emergencies and crises because they just don't take action. You can never count on them to fulfill those responsibilities. Like, could be like picking up the kids and stuff, and like they say they're gonna do that, and the last minute they tell you, sorry, I couldn't make it, and they just leave you to clean up that whole big mess. The covert type is gonna use the smear campaign through the poor me. Oh, poor me, they did this to me, feel bad for me, playing the victim, or through false concern. You know, I'm just so concerned about my daughter who has mental health problems, or I'm just so concerned about so-and-so, you know, your ex, because this and that is going on. And then they'll either share very personal, intimate information about you that you don't want other people to know, or they'll make up things, spread lies and gossip about you, but always playing the victim to get other people to think that you're the one with the problem. So how does the covert narcissist apologize? They will apologize quite often. In fact, they will often say everything you ever wanted to hear. Their apologies are very sophisticated. They'll even use crocodile tears. They're amazing at turning on the waterworks to get you to be confused and think that they actually have remorse for what they did, that they actually feel bad, that they're actually going to change and not do that anymore. You're also going to notice the very meticulous usage of language when they apologize that carefully avoids self-responsibility. Things like, I'm sorry you're so hurt. That's neither an apology nor an owning of their responsibility for anything that they did. I'm sorry for whatever I did to hurt you. Again, a faux apology. It's not real. So you'll always notice that very meticulous phrasing that they'll use to disguise a lack of self-responsibility as an apology. With the covert type, there will often be plenty promises of change, and that's really dangerous because that could keep you holding on there, hoping for that real change, thinking back to all the generous, seemingly supportive things that they did at the beginning or that they do in society, but they don't do in your relationship or in your family or in that one-on-one contact that you have with them at work. What does the covert hoovering look like? Like everything they do, it's going to be very indirect, sophisticated, and subtle. The most sophisticated covert forms are never going to do that hoovering directly, at least not initially. They'll always find proxies, that means a third person, to do the hoovering for them, so they don't have to risk the rejection because they are deeply insecure. They'll use the pity ploy and the guilt tripping for hoovering as well. So maybe they'll send their proxy to you to tell you that the narcissist is sick or dying or needs help, or maybe that someone else does. So maybe it's like the mother of the narcissist and you got really close to their family when you were in that relationship or that friendship, or maybe you went no contact with the covert type in your own family, and so someone else from your family comes to you and tells you that that person or someone else in the family close to that person is sick or dying or needs help. So those are all very indirect tactics to get you back into the abuse cycle. When the covert type tells you that they miss you, what they mean is that they need you. They need that narcissistic supply. They'll often even use words like, you're the only one who blah, blah, blah. So I hope this video was helpful for you. I tried to make it as short as possible. I did go kind of over, and surely I still left out a lot of other things. If you would like to add something to this topic, leave that comment below. That could be helpful, constructive, and positive for other people. If you like this video and it helped you, hit the like button. If you haven't hit that little bell next to the subscribe button, go ahead and do that to get regular notifications when my videos come out. Otherwise, you won't find out. I'm sending you a big hug.